Even though Washington had restored confidence in his men entering the new year of 1777, his army was still fighting from behind, having barely escaped General Howe's significantly larger and better trained army. By July, Fort Ticonderoga had successfully been retaken by British General John Burgoyne and his men, who then continued south towards the Hudson River, where he was supposed to meet with General Howe. But General Howe decided to head south towards the Chesapeake Bay area to face George Washington and his army. On September 11, 1777, the two armies met at Brandywine Creek, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia, where General Howe would defeat the Americans, forcing Washington to retreat once again. By September 25th, General Howe and his army marched into Philadelphia. On October 4th, Washington decides to go on the offensive for the first time at the Battle of Germantown, which would end in a minor defeat for Washington and his army, who ended up retreating back to Valley Forge for the winter. This string of defeats may seem bad for the Americans, but when Howe went south to pursue Washington and his army, he left General Burgoyne in a very vulnerable position near Saratoga. General Howe's decision to pursue Washington ended up costing the British army severely. On September 19th, an American force under the command of General Horatio Gates attacked Burgoyne and his men at Freeman's Farm, defeating him in the First Battle of Saratoga. Just weeks later, on October 7th, Horatio Gates was finally able to finish off Burgoyne and his men in the Second Battle of Saratoga, and just 10 days later, Burgoyne was left with no choice but to surrender the rest of his forces to the Americans. The battles at Saratoga marked the turning point in the war, and proved that the American army can put up a fight against the British. This led to the French openly joining the war on the American side, and with them eventually formally declaring on their rival Great Britain in June of 1778. After General Howe suffered an embarrassing defeat the previous year, losing an entire army and letting Washington escape twice, he could no longer continue as a supreme commander and was replaced by Sir Henry Clinton. As for the Americans, the winter months of 1778 was when the first signs of French aid appeared, with France sending over a Prussian military officer by the name of Friedrich von Steuben, who would train and discipline Washington's army through the winter as the war slowed to a stalemate. On June 28, 1778, Clinton made his first move and tried to withdraw his army from Philadelphia to New York. Washington was able to catch Clinton and his force outside of Monmouth, New Jersey. The Battle of Monmouth ended in a draw, with the newly trained American army being able to hold its ground against the superior British army. This, however, didn't prevent Clinton from getting his army and supplies safely to New York. On July 8th, the French fleet finally arrived ready to face the British. In late July, the French and Americans organized a joint attack on the British-occupied city of Newport, Rhode Island. This attack, however, ended up failing.